Okay, so we're going to do the color layer on top of what we did with the value. Now, this in the syllabus it says this is the Venetian still life. So this is basically Venetian Renaissance painting technique. Okay, and so what that would mean is going over this tonal underpainting, sorry, with layers of transparent color. Okay, and what the transparent color does is it gives it more depth, right, than you would get if you were just painting flatly. So what I talked about before, as far as the color goes, starting off with a color that's darker and cooler than the light part of the apple, and that's going to go over the whole thing. This is not the actual color of the apple, and I'm using a that bristle round. And you could do multiple layers of color, and what Titian, who was one of the Venetian Renaissance artists that we talked about, he talks about the layers of paint, how many layers. And he says not one or two, but 30 or 40. We're going to do one or two. We're not going to do 30 or 40. Now, when you look at the shadow in the still life, the shadow on the apple, it's green, but if you saw that isolated without the context of the apple, you might not be able to identify that as green. So what it is, it's basically a muted version of the green. So what, somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, beginning design student, for example, will take a color that's, using the green and then they'll use a dark green in the shadow that's equally saturated. So you don't want to do that. The shadow layers are going to be really thin layers of paint. Okay, so on the shadow side, it's going to be maybe that and nothing else. And we might have to make it darker, but we might not have to make it darker. What's going to happen is this is going to get lighter, right? I didn't say to start, but this is true. This is absolutely dry now. So the underpainting that you have has got to be completely dry to the touch. It can't be even a little bit wet. We want it completely dry. And if this is less, I think actually less than a week, but it may have been a week. You will have a week's time in between these two things. So that would be enough. So there we have that first thin layer of that darker, cooler green, and then we're going to go on top with the lighter green. The other thing that you have to understand about color, because it hasn't really come up before, but it's going to come up now. The solvent is not like when you're doing watercolor and you're rinsing your brush out in water. The solvent is only for cleaning your brushes at the end. In the medium, you're not using that to clean your brushes out. So you're not going to be using the same brushes. I'm not going to be using the same brushes to paint the red apple that I painted the green apple with, because that's going to impact how I'm perceiving that color. So the green would be mixing in with the red, and that wouldn't be good. Okay. So now I'm going to come on top with a warmer, lighter green. Just hatching strokes with that. And then I'm going to take that same warmer, lighter green and make it even lighter by mixing white with it. So I'm using form following strokes. And this is opaque. This is not, there's no medium or anything in that. And then taking the dry blending brush, and I'm going to take that same green, but I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it. And remember, that was the cadmium lemon. And so the yellow is the warmer, which is why this is going on last. So the form following is following the actual texture of the apple, so that that nice sort of streakiness to the flesh that you get, that is going to come out by doing this. And then there's a light highlight on that apple, but it isn't going to be white, but it might be lighter than what we have. So I'm going to get some white mixed in with that. This is 6 Sigil round brush I'm using. So here is we have a highlight. So as I put that on, you might think, oh, that looks like it's white, but it's got green mixed in with it. And just like when we were doing the underpainting, that we're building up the actual light side of the object. So you notice I haven't done a thing to this, to the shadow side. And I might not need to do anything to the shadow side, more than what I've done already. Dry blender again. Now we're doing the stem. The stem is just the underpainting, but I can go on top. Probably the burnt sienna first. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the burnt sienna, mixed with some yellow ochre. That light spot there. It's going to need to be lighter than that, so we're going to actually make it lighter with a little bit more white that I already had mixed up. And that goes there. And then we have a little bit of a shadow underneath. So for the shadow underneath, we'll use the umber. Part of the stem. And it does seem to be in here, this is really fairly dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a darker value. Just to define that a little bit. It might surprise you to know that what I just put in there is a very saturated violet. But because it's mixing in with that green, it doesn't look like violet, it just looks like a dark value. Now, the other thing that you're going to need to understand about color is that it's going to be relational. So when you see a color next to something else, that how you perceive that color is going to change based on what happens here. So that's a fairly neutral surface. It isn't too much different than what's on here right now. But we probably are going to want to see what that's going to look like eventually. Okay. What's going to happen is we're going to speed things up. I'm going to show you the what we're going to do with the red apple, how that's going to work. But what's going to happen with this, the bowl is a neutral, but it's a warm neutral. It's a burnt sienna. So there's that going on in the bowl. So we'll be putting burnt sienna in here and some tones mixed with probably white or maybe yellow ochre to make some of the lighter areas in the bowl. This will be probably close to what it is now. We might even be able to leave these and just paint around them, but chances are we won't. We'll put something on top of it. Something in here is going to need to be a little bit lighter, but that's going to be the probably the what I actually think I'm going to use is a yellow ochre with white, but it's going to need to be grayed down a little bit, so that means I'm going to add a little bit of violet to it. Okay, so for our apple, like we talked about before, that cooler red to start is going to go on in here. So I'm going to use a bristle flat. Even that looks a little warm. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of the violet that I had, the red violet, and mix it in, make that red even cooler. So let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that looks better. And then I'm thinning that with a medium. And that's going to go over the whole apple. Although I'm going to avoid putting it on the part that's white. So you can hear me scrubbing that in. So it's just this thin layer of paint going over the whole thing. We're just going to take out what I forgot. There's a little bit of it there, but that's not going to make a big difference. So on the shadow side, we're going to leave that alone. Just putting it out even thinner. And you can see that this is definitely not the color of that apple. Now I'm going to take my warmer red, my cadmium red, and that's going to come on top. And my cadmium red, I don't need to worry about keeping that out as much. And this warm red is only going to go on the light side, unless I had like a reflected light or something over here. Okay, maybe I do a little bit over on this side right there, so I might put that there. But other than that, it's going to just be on the light side. And then just like with the apple, I'm going to take that same red mixed with white, and again, form following. And then hit that with the blender. You can't see my palette, but you know, most of the time when I pause and I'm like mixing up something with the white, I'm using the palette knife to do that. But sometimes you're just going to take the brush and pick up a little bit of something else and add it too. So we do have some highlights. There's one here and there's one here. So we're going to need to make that even lighter. Just like with that apple, and have a little bit of the color mixed in. It's going to be really, really light, but it still has some of that cadmium red in it. Now that part, we want to, I think, because there is some green tone in that, but I think what we're going to want to do first is put down a little bit. I'm going to try orange first. And that orange is going to blend with that red I want. And then I'm going to use yellow mixed with white. And this is the yellow, the cadmium. cadmium yellow medium. It needs to be even lighter in here. There's a little flecks of green. Putting in little flecks of green, which you can see are getting neutralized. I'm using just my blender right now to cover over that area that was create a transition from the color to the umber. And this is cadmium yellow mixed with white. Again, form following. So I want to see now what that's going to look like. So I'm going to go on top of that with the burnt sienna. Still thin and transparent. And if we catch that edge, the apple, that's not a terrible thing. So that stripe, I didn't do anything to it. And you can see it stands out a lot more now. You can see the difference when it's going on a lighter part versus a shadow part. Now this part, that light wasn't as pronounced. It was just very thin light that's happening there. You can kind of see, maybe, I don't know how easy it is to see. The paint is kind of puffed up a little bit, so that's where the blender's going to come in to smooth that out a little bit. When I get to that, it's going to be a darker, somewhat cooler color. So it could, even if I say I put a blue there, which pure saturated blue is probably not what I would do, but let's say I did do that, it wouldn't read as blue because of what's going on underneath it. So to put down what's going on in here, this is definitely yellower. Right, because we're going dark over light, and then I'm going to put my light part on there. Also still a tad yellow, so I can neutralize that a little bit. I'm just going to want to show you what this is going to look like next to the green. Now I'm going to drag that into the cast shadow. The cast shadow might not need to be accented at all, but you know, I might end up putting something on there. All right, so I need to lighten that up now. Just to see what it's gonna look like next to our apple. Okay, so you're starting to see how that's going to work. And we will be continuing this, and you can watch it to the end